Honey, we need to talk, she said, her tone firm but laced with hesitation. She stood a few feet away, her hands planted on her hips in that familiar stance that screamed impatience and determination. I didn't look up right away. Instead, I let her stand there, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, while I casually continued cutting into the steak I had just grilled for myself. Each bite was deliberate, slow. I knew where she'd been earlier, where she always went on these so-called nights out with the girls. She might think she was subtle, but I'd pieced it all together months ago. After a moment, I finally glanced up, raising an eyebrow. Do we really need to? I asked, my tone flat, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Her fidgeting grew more pronounced. She hated when I didn't give her the reaction she was fishing for. I'm not happy, she said, the words coming out in a single rushed breath. She crossed her arms, as though bracing for impact. With us. With our marriage. I feel like something needs to change. We need to do something about it. I leaned back in my chair, chuckling softly. Do we, now? I replied, my voice dripping with mock curiosity. I tilted my head, letting her discomfort linger in the air. And what exactly do you propose we do? Enlighten me. The tension hung between us like a storm cloud, her frustration building with every second of my refusal to take her seriously. But I was done playing the clueless husband. She wanted a conversation? Fine. But it wasn't going to go the way she expected. I'd spent the last 20 years busting my back at the mill, pulling overnight shifts that turned into double shifts more often than not, just to make ends meet. I worked harder than I thought humanly possible to put food on our table, keep a roof over our heads, and provide our kids the opportunities one never had. I even managed to send our son and daughter to college, all while making sure Rebecca, my wife, could stay home and raise them like she always said she wanted. Apparently, none of that counted for much anymore. I just feel like it would be good, for both of us, to maybe expand our horizons a little, she said, her words stumbling out like she was afraid they might trip and fall. I cut into another bite of steak, blood pooling on the plate, just the way I liked it, practically mooing. Expand our horizons, I echoed, the corners of my mouth tugging upward into a smirk. You mean like taking a basket weaving class together or something? I laughed, a low, humorless sound, and nearly choked on the bite I was chewing. Rebecca flushed but didn't flinch. Well, not exactly, she murmured, her voice losing a bit of its earlier bravado. She started moving closer, almost like she thought it might soften the blow. As she leaned in, the faint smell of cheap wine wafted toward me, her signature scent after a night out with the girls. Only this time, there was something else beneath it. A smell I recognized instantly, sharp and undeniable. It wasn't surprising. Not anymore. She stood close enough that I could see the sheen of guilt in her eyes, though she tried to mask it with determination. Whatever she thought she was about to say, it wasn't going to surprise me. Not tonight. Not ever again. She slid into the chair beside me, her hand casually brushing against my thigh as I continued eating, pretending not to notice. I was thinking more along the lines of something fun, she said, her tone light, almost playful. Something exciting. Maybe even kinky. Kinky? Huh. I said, keeping my voice neutral. You mean like skydiving? I asked, unable to suppress a smirk. She laughed nervously, her hand wandering higher, a little less subtle now. No, not like that, she said, her voice softening as her hand drifted toward my lap. I was thinking something a little wild. You know, sexually. I set down my fork and looked at her, raising an eyebrow. Sexually? I repeated, feigning confusion. You mean you're finally ready to try other positions? Her face twisted in disgust, and she pulled back slightly. EW? No, she exclaimed, shaking her head. Then what? I asked, folding my arms and leaning back, waiting for her to spit it out. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned closer, her hand resuming its deliberate motion. I mean, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. What would you think about opening our marriage? Wouldn't you like the idea of being with someone new? Someone younger, maybe? I stared at her for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Then, with a calm that surprised even me, I said, sure. Except for one tiny, inconvenient detail. You wouldn't even have to wear a protection, she offered, her voice light, as though that might sweeten the deal. I set my fork down and looked her in the eye. That's not the issue, I said calmly. I mean our wedding vows. You know, the part where I promised to forsake all others? In front of our friends, our family, and God? I can't very well break that promise, can I? What kind of person would that make me? She let out a laugh, the kind that felt hollow and forced. Oh, honey, it's just sex, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. It's not a big deal. I wouldn't mind. Well, I would, I replied firmly. Her hand, which had been steadily roaming over my lap, stopped abruptly. It wasn't getting her anywhere anyway. She leaned back, frustration flashing across her face. Why do you always have to be such a stick in the mud? She snapped. Every time I suggest something new, something fun and exciting, you shoot it down. We're not getting any younger, you know? If we don't start living now, our chance is going to pass us by. Well, I said, pausing to chew another bite of steak. If you want to break the promise you made to all those people, that's on you. But I'm not going to be a part of it. Her expression shifted, and just like that, her hand resumed its earlier exploration. So, you mean you'd be okay with me having some fun, even if you're not doing the same? She asked, her tone soft, almost hopeful. I picked up the last piece of steak on my plate, examining it thoughtfully before popping it into my mouth. Then, with deliberate calm, I pointed my steak knife directly at her, the blade steady between her eyes. You really think you can turn me into a cuck? I asked, my voice low and cold. Her hand froze again, the air between us thick with tension. She blinked, caught off guard. I was just thinking it might spice things up for us, she stammered, the confidence from earlier draining from her voice. You know our sex life has been, well, pretty much dead for a while now. Yeah, I said, leaning back in my chair and fixing her with a hard stare. It has. And whose fault is that? Mine? I don't think so. I know what you've been up to, Rebecca. Her face paled. What do you mean? She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I know all about your so-called girls' nights out, I said, my tone sharp and unyielding. I know about the guys you've been sneaking off with, the ones you've been screwing in the backroom of the bar, in their cars, in dingy hotel rooms, and even in a filthy alley. Seriously, Rebecca, do you have any standards left? The look on her face was almost comical, her jaw dropping so far it practically hit the table. Her wide, bugged-out eyes looked as if they might pop right out of her head. What are you talking about? She spluttered. I didn't do any of those things. I shook my head slowly, sighing as if her denial was almost too ridiculous to take seriously. Really, Rebecca? Are you seriously going to insult my intelligence by pretending you didn't do this? Yes, she snapped, her voice rising as she crossed her arms defiantly. I didn't do anything. I shook my head again, letting out a slow, deliberate sigh, and motioned toward the pendant dangling from her necklace. Do you remember when I gave you that necklace? I asked, my voice calm but pointed. She hesitated, clearly unsure where this was going. Yeah, she said after a beat. Our last anniversary. What does that have to do with anything? I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. That's around the same time you started your girls' nights out, isn't it? Her face faltered for just a second. I guess so, she admitted, her tone cautious. And you never noticed anything unusual about that necklace? I asked, nodding toward it. She grabbed the pendant, holding it up in front of her and tilting it from side to side as if seeing it for the first time. What are you talking about? She asked, her confusion evident. I leaned back and smirked. It's amazing, I said, my voice laced with mock nostalgia. How far technology has come in my lifetime. I remember when video cameras weighed a ton. Remember that? Her face began to pale, the wheels turning in her head as she slowly started to understand what I was implying. Rebecca tilted her head, narrowing her eyes as if trying to decide whether I'd lost my mind. Anyway, I continued, my tone casual. The cameras they make today are incredible. So tiny you can fit one inside a necklace pendant. Crazy, right? Her expression shifted as the weight of my words sank in. The color drained from her face, her confidence evaporating right before my eyes. It was like watching her dissolve into nothing. Every night after your little outings, I went on, savoring the moment. I'd wait until you passed out, or fell asleep, as you like to call it. Then I'd take your necklace from the dresser, download the latest video, and watch it from start to finish. Sometimes I'd edit together the best parts. Oh, and here's the kicker. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. I uploaded it all to my favorite spicy site. Congratulations, sweetheart. You're a star. Her eyes widened in horror, and I swear I didn't think her face could grow any paler, but I was wrong. She looked ghostly, practically translucent. Don't worry, love, I added with a cold smile. I set all the videos to private. No one else can see them. Just me. I reached into the bin next to me and pulled out a manila envelope. With a flick of my wrist, I tossed it onto the table in her direction. It landed with a dull thud. "My lawyer drafted these about a week ago," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. "I was just waiting for the right moment to hand them over. And wouldn't you know it? Now seems like the perfect time." She was trembling now, her hands shaking as she tried to steady herself. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over and streaming down her cheeks in uneven rivers. Her breaths came in shallow gasps as if she couldn't quite catch enough air. "I'm not going to lie," I said, my voice steady, almost detached. "The terms of this divorce aren't fair. You're getting far less than you could if you decided to fight it." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words settle before continuing. "But," I added, leaning forward slightly, "and I really don't mean to sound like an a-hole here, you've left me no choice. If you don't accept these terms, those videos I've uploaded will be made public. To everyone. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, everyone you've ever known. And trust me, Rebecca, I'll make sure they all get the links." Her composure crumbled completely. I've never seen someone break down so completely before that moment. It was as if she physically melted before my eyes, her shoulders slumping, her body shaking as she dissolved into a puddle of tears and muffled sobs. Needless to say, Rebecca accepted my terms, and we managed to finalize an amicable and drama-free divorce. For the first time in her adult life, she's working a waitress job, no less, at the very bar where she used to indulge her escapades. That has to be awkward for her. As for me, I've never been happier. I work less, go out more, and recently met an incredible woman who genuinely seems to appreciate me for who I am. Just the other day, as we were lounging on the couch after dinner, she turned to me with that familiar, soft expression. "Honey," she said, her voice gentle, "we need to talk." I couldn't help but sigh, a bit of tension creeping in. I had become so conditioned to expect difficult conversations that I braced myself instinctively. "What is it?" I asked, already preparing myself for whatever news was coming next. She didn't respond immediately, just smiled at me with warmth in her eyes. Her gaze softened, and she reached out to take my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I just want to tell you how much I love you," she said, her voice full of sincerity, "and how much you mean to me. You make me feel seen, appreciated, for who I really am." I've never felt more loved. I blinked, stunned for a moment, but the warmth in her voice melted away any lingering tension. A grin spread across my face, one I couldn't suppress even if I tried. "Now that," I said, my voice lighter, filled with genuine affection, "is a conversation worth having." And in that moment, everything felt right. No more uncertainty, no more hidden agendas, just pure, honest love.